G'day and welcome to the Genre Fiction Podcast. I'm Jack Roney.
And I'm Harry Colfer.
And introducing our guest for this episode is author C J Spataro, who is an award-winning short fiction writer whose work has appeared in many literary magazines and anthologies. She lives in Philadelphia, where she directs the MFA in creative writing and the MA in publishing programs at Rosemont College, and is a founder partner of Philadelphia Stories. Her debut novel, More Strange Than True, was released earlier this year. So, Carla, welcome to the Genre Fiction Podcast.
Wow, thank you so much. I really appreciate being able to talk to both of you.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. We love having our international guests. So, thank you so much for making the time to join us. Let's get underway by talking about your novel entitled More Strange Than True. Now, I was reading some reviews around your novel, and one that I thought was really interesting. It's described as a delightful blend of fantasy, romance, and realism, a book for readers who love dogs, Shakespeare, magic, and witty, warm-hearted storytelling. So, having a look at it, I see it's the pretense to the story is about the protagonist dog who becomes a human.
Yes.
Can you tell us about your? Can you tell us about your novel and the inspiration for the story?
Sure. So I had been working on collection of short stories, and I had decided they were all going to be speculative stories, and one way or the other, they were all going to have a central romantic relationship in them. And I don't know. I don't even know exactly what got me thinking about this, but I was kind of thinking about my early days in Philadelphia. Um, and I had a rescue dog who was amazing. I loved him. And I remember being kind of lonely and sitting in my apartment and looking at my dog thinking, why can't you be some and humans are so terrible, generally speaking. And I just, I was kind of thinking about that. And I thought, okay, well, so what if that did happen? Like, what if somehow someone said something like that, and then the next day they woke up and someone had come along and turned their dog into a man? Like, where would that lead? Where would that go? And so that was basically the genesis for it. And I thought, like I said originally, it would be a short story, but as soon as I really started thinking about the big picture of the story, I realized even though the premise seems very small, that the story itself would probably be much too big for a short story. So I decided to give it a shot as a novel, and that's how the whole thing got started.
I'm interested in your comment that you just made there that the pretense to the story, the plot itself is quite small, but then you felt that there was enough added layers to turn it into a novel. That's an interesting thought, I guess, for a lot of us when we're thinking about our plot ideas and we want to come up with a story that's going to be able to carry it through for the duration of a 80, 90,000 word novel. Can tell us talk us through how you were able to grow that initial concept into something that would have enough legs to carry through a full novel.
Yeah, it's interesting because I worked with a writer once. I went to a writing conference and had an opportunity to work with Mac McAvoy, who unfortunately has passed away. But um, I worked I remember workshopping a short story with him, and he just looked at me at one point and he said, "You're a long form writer and you just need to like accept that." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, okay." Um, but I mean, I still write short stories, but wouldn't be the first time. Several novels that I've attempted started as short stories, um, just because the shorts. I'm trying to think of the best way to explain it. So, short stories are like films. They're mediums of compression, right? You have a limited space, a limited amount of time, and you have to kind of compress the story and make sure you can fit the story into the allotted number of pages. A novel is a medium of expansion, at least in my mind. It can be as long as you want it to be. I mean, look at, you know, one of my favorite novels of all time is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and it's like 850 pages. Um, so, um, so I guess I was thinking that with this particular novel, with More Strange Than True, in order to really do justice to like explain how the dog becomes a man and then all the things that come after that, like how the story's going to get resolved and that it was just going to need some room to expand. And so I didn't even attempt it as a short story. Because as soon as I sat down and started thinking like, okay, so how does the dog get turned into a man? Oh, well, what if some fairies show up and turn the dog into a man? And like, okay, now we need to explain the world of the fairies and now what's going to be happening with that, and it just kept kind of even as I was thinking about it before I even started writing it, it just was kind of snowballing. So for me, I'm called a pantser. I don't really plan very much. So kind of just sit down by the seat of my pants and I think about things a lot, which I know maybe sounds weird to people. Um, but I do really, really ruminate hard on things. Um, it before I write, as I'm writing, after I'm writing, and as I'm revising, just kind of always trying to work through different kind of scenarios in my head a little bit. So,
I have to ask though, and
yeah.
I apologize in advance, and it'll probably get deleted. But here in Australia, you have to have dog licenses. I don't know whether it is in the US.
To own a dog?
To own a dog, you need a dog
Oh yeah,
license.
no, you don't. I have to have a
Yeah,
license in the
and the dog licenses are cheaper if you get the dog neutered.
Oh, well, the dog is neutered in my book.
Oh, right, there
So,
you go. That was the
yeah.
question.
Yeah, no, there's a whole chapter in the book where, well, when before the fairies can turn him into a man, they have to restore his
Right.
business. So, and there's it's quite a. I feel like it's probably the funniest scene in the book where the fairies are all trying to figure out why he is missing his testicles. So, and how they're what would be the best way to restore his testicles because if they're going to turn him into a man, he's probably going to need them. So,
Uh-huh,
um,
uh-huh.
yeah,
Some
that was
some might argue that he doesn't need them, but anyway, that might be another.
well, for my purposes, he definitely needed them.
Right,
So,
right, right.
so that was like a super fun scene to write. And just having been a dog owner and being around dogs most of my life, I felt like most responsible dog owners get their dogs, um,
You did.
neutered.
Hmm.
And, so I figured that my character, as I imagined her, Jewel, would be a very responsible dog owner. And so, um,
Yeah.
that's all. That's all. That's all in the book. So
Fine,
yeah.
fine.
So, Carla, how would you describe the tone of the book? Would you say that it's more of a light-hearted romance? You've got that twist of sort of real world fantasy, or are there more serious undertones or themes?
I would say for me as a writer, this is definitely, and I've said this to, when people have asked me about it, people who know me as a writer, I would say this is definitely the breeziest thing I've ever written. So, it is comedic. It, I think, at least I hope so. People have said they've found it funny, and some reviewers even, said laugh out loud funny, which made me feel really good. Because I just felt like there were just a lot of naturally humorous situations involved in the whole concept of the book. So, there are always going to be, for me, there's always going to be some more serious undercurrents. And sometimes my work is very dark. And yet I always try to put some humor in 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 there somehow. I try to balance things out a little bit, even when the books are very or the short stories are very serious. So
Did the
that's
the
just
fairies
me.
also sort of crank up his intelligence, or did he stay at the sort of dog level?
Oh, no, no, there's all kinds of magic involved.
Oh, right,
So,
right.
yeah, yeah. So he at first, Jewel, the main character of the book, she has to um show him some things. Like she has to teach him how to use the bathroom and things like that. Um, and that's also kind of she has to teach him how to wear shoes, and she has to buy him buy him clothes and all that kind of stuff. Um, but then eventually part of the magic is that he learns and adapts really quickly and becomes very much a human,
Right.
um, pretty quickly. But he always has a few things, like he likes to sit really close to Jewel. He likes to smell her hair. He does things like that. So,
I guess the
um,
story would appeal to dog lovers. I have two dogs, a Spoodle and a Labrador. And how often
mm.
do you look into your dog's eyes and they're looking at you lovingly and you're thinking, what are you thinking? I'd love to get inside your head and know exactly what you're thinking. Did that sort of play a part in terms of your thinking around the story?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And like once I started working on the book and I was describing the concept to other people, especially women, I, I was really shocked when I uh discovered how many women were thinking sort of the same thing that I had been thinking. Like, why can't you be my boyfriend? Like, you're a much better person than most of the people I know. But yeah, that is the thing. And one of the things I did in preparation for writing the book is I read this really terrific nonfiction book. I think it's called Inside the Mind of a Dog. It's kind of a memoir slash nonfiction book about how dogs process the world, because I wanted to include that. Dogs don't really process visually, they don't see the world the same way that humans do. Obviously, their sense of smell is much, much better than ours. Um, and there's just other, you
Yeah.
know, like they love us so unconditionally is really a process of evolution, getting them um, is greatly accelerated when it seems like, you know, the animal really loves you. So
I was watching an
it's
interesting documentary. I think it was on Netflix. I think it was
yeah.
called the life of dogs, and it was pretty much what you were
Mhm.
just explaining. It's the perspective of the world through the eyes of dogs. It was really interesting. And the question was asked: do dogs really love us, or is that just a notion that we would like to think because we feed them and we look after them, they reciprocate?
Right.
And the lady said, well, look, they exhibit all the symptoms and mannerisms of love. So yeah, I'd like to say that scientifically, dogs do love us. They imprint on us and they do have that affection. I've often looked at my dogs and I've said this a few times. Anyone who people who are not dog lovers or pet lovers will say, "Oh, they're just a dog," but I look at my dogs and think you've just got such beautiful souls.
Mm.
Anyone who says that dogs don't have a soul, I've got it wrong in my view. These dogs look at you and if they could talk, I would love to know what they're saying. So my question to you, Carla, is
Mhm.
with your character who goes from being a dog to a human, did
Mhm.
those character traits come through in terms of innocence, not having the negative human traits of greed and selfishness and evilness? I think humans are one of the only species that can actually be classed as evil. Uh,
Oh, I don't
I
know.
think
I
that's
think that's
I'm
a
going.
very subjective thing.
I know. But you know what I mean? So, I think dogs come with this natural innocence. Was that portrayed in your dog slash human character?
I think so. I mean, that definitely was my intention, was that that was kind of the thing that makes him irresistible. I mean, obviously, he's very attractive. At one point, it was like, well, he was a very beautiful dog, and now he's a very beautiful man. Um, as a dog lover, you would appreciate. I was very specific about the breed of dog. I chose a standard poodle, because poodles are very intelligent. Um, second only to what is it, the border collies, as far as trainability and innate intelligence, supposedly. So I made him a I made him a standard poodle, and because poodles are interesting, right? They've become like these fluffy, uh, um, objects of frilliness and what, but they're really hunting dogs.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's this kind of duality with a poodle, um, which I was also sort of interested in. But yeah, I definitely tried to keep him innocent. That was part of the way he grows as a character after he becomes a human. And it turns out, I mean, I don't want to spoil the book, but he's not just a human. So, I mean, and that comes out later on. There's other magic going on that nobody really can figure out until the end of the book when everybody sort of figures out what's going on. So, yeah, that was definitely part of it. And he sees things, I in some ways I wanted him to kind of process the world in kind of a childlike way, but not as a child, because obviously that's not really attractive, right? But I think, as an innocent, as a person that hasn't really learned, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't say this, right? Maybe I should keep this to myself or whatever. And he's just always very matter of fact about everything, and kind of is like, "Well, you know, well, it's the truth. So why is everybody all worked up? That so yeah, I think, and those qualities all come, I think, from, having lived with dogs and pets in general. I've
I think it,
also,
it sounds similar to the main character in Stranger in a Strange Land because he's grown up in the
mm-hmm,
Martian world and comes to Earth and it's all very different, interact very differently and he's very innocent and it has to be
right.
explained how things work.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't really, I mean, I have read that, and that was not really sort of in the back of my mind, but there's definitely parallels there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
We,
Um,
we've
I
often
was thinking in terms of, oh,
keep
are we
going. We've got a
back?
bit of a lag.
Okay.
No, sorry, keep
I
going.
was,
I'll edit that
yeah,
bit out.
no, I was just saying that's a really interesting parallel between Stranger in a Strange Land, which I have read, uh, and uh, I wasn't really thinking about when I was writing my book, but I definitely can see parallels between that story and my story in some ways. Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Um, yeah.
And the notion of character development, we've all probably heard the idea of character arcs and sending your character on a journey. We want to see that the character has has changed from the beginning of the book to the end. And I'm sure with your human slash dog character, there's certainly been a very steep character arc there.
Yeah, there is really like a very extreme character arc. Yeah.
Yes.
What happens at the end, it is very extreme. So, yeah.
I haven't
Um
had a chance to read it yet, but I'm very intrigued, so I'll have to grab myself a copy and have a read. Looking forward to it. Carla,
oh,
can we now
awesome. Yeah.
move on to your role as a creative writing teacher? My next question,
Yeah.
as a teacher of creative writing, how has that influenced your own writing, and do you think you're a better writer for it?
Oh, I'm 100% a better writer for having been a teacher. Um I always tell people that if I had all the money in the world, I would just be a perennial student. It's my favorite thing. And the closest thing I could get to be able to do that was to be a college professor. So I feel very grateful for having had the opportunity that I have had for the last 12 years in running the MFA program at Rosemont College. In the last couple of years, I've also been running the publishing program. Um, but yeah, working with creative writing students of all levels has just really been a gift. And I uh, would never probably have started writing speculative fiction in the first place if it weren't for my students at Rosemont. So many of whom are writing, epic fantasy and science fiction, and they're writing all this stuff, which I always loved. Like growing up, total Star Trek nerd. Like some of my fondest memories are of staying up really late watching reruns of the original Star Trek with my dad. Like our local TV station where I grew up always showed it Saturday night at midnight, and I just remember loving that. And so these were things I loved. I loved science fiction especially. Um, and so I thought, after a while, I'm watching my students, really dig into all of this, and I thought, well, what am I so afraid of? Why am I limiting myself to just writing literary fiction when I really love to read this. I love to engage with this kind of work. So why not just give it a try? I mean, if you can't pull it off, you can't pull it off, but you won't know until you try. So I will always be grateful to my students really for kind of giving me permission in a way. I always kind of talk to them about not being afraid to fail, and so I have to take my own advice frequently. um, but yeah, and also just from a nuts and bolts standpoint, like to use a cliche, I guess, is um being able to like break down discrete elements of craft. I've been teaching novel writing at Rosemont for quite a while, and this has also helped me. It hasn't necessarily helped me get published, but it's definitely made me a better writer, and it's definitely um, made my drafts like my first drafts are better. My subsequent drafts are stronger. I have a better idea of what I want to do and how to do it, which is frequently the hard part. Is like, okay, so I know what I want to do now. How do I do that? Now I feel like I have a whole arsenal sort of in my toolkit, and I can pretty much figure out how to do whatever it is I'm kind of thinking. It might take some trial and error, but I usually can figure out how to do it. And that's all because of teaching. You can only learn so much as a student, and so much of craft is
Writing.
repetition. Yeah,
You got to write.
yeah, yeah. And art in general, it's all about practice. It's just
Yeah.
you have to do it. Like you can spend a lot of time studying and thinking and whatever, but you have to eventually just do it. So,
I can get away with this because my missus is a teacher, but I thought, wasn't it if you can't do, you teach?
well, I hear that, but um and I've heard that in the past, obviously. Um I don't know. I feel
Uh,
like there's plenty of teachers who do.
yeah,
And I think if you're a good teacher, like teaching is its own reward. And if
yeah,
I never get another thing published, I will be very happy to have been a teacher and have helped a lot of other people get published.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
um, that's been certainly um, very gratifying for me. So.
Well, you've got a lot of short stories done before your novel, though, haven't you?
Yeah, I've had a fair amount of short stories published. It's funny because I always have to put things in perspective. I happen to like know a couple of people. I have one friend who writes flash fiction who's literally had over 1,000 pieces of flash published. So, like in comparison to Randall Brown, I feel like a total slacker. And whenever I see him and I say something to him about it, he's like, "Yeah, it's Flash, Carla. They're like 500 words or shorter most of the time." So, but
I,
still,
I,
it's like pretty impressive.
yeah, I did mean to ask, what's your sort of short story length? What do you normally target? Is there a sort of standard what you go to?
No, actually, to be perfectly, how's that for just a really direct answer?
That's a good answer. Yep, thanks for that.
Uh, I actually really love writing long short stories, or what sometimes, especially in science fiction, they call novelettes.
Yeah.
And they're very difficult to get published, but I really love that. Like I have a novelette in my short story collection. that I'm currently trying to get published. That is how long is it? I want to say it's like 17,500 words, something like that. It's about 60 pages long. Um, so it's almost novella length, but not quite. Um, and I've had a couple of other stories that are around 10,000 words long, that I've managed to get published. Um, for me, I tend to, I've written flash fiction, I've written plenty of things that are under 1,000 words. But also I tend to sit around 5 to 7,500 words,
Yeah.
so a little on the longer side.
Yeah, five is mine. That's the sort of like pitch that
Mhm.
I normally go to. I think if it's
Yeah.
shorter than that, it just gets a bit too, it's too constricting.
Yeah, I
Where,
mean, I think it just depends on the story you're
yeah,
telling. Like that's the way I look at it. It
yeah.
just depends.
It is
Everything kind of
interesting
needs.
that whole sort of
Mhm.
story length because uh, Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451 was only like 45,000 words, and that's considered a novel, and you go, hold on a
Mhm.
minute, it's pretty bloody short.
Yeah. Yeah, I teach a class in the spring called Constructing the Novel, which is kind of based on NaNoWriMo.
Yeah,
I'm guessing you guys have that in Australia.
yeah,
And so uh the students write a craptastic, as I like to say, draft of a novel in a semester. And it's all just process, just writing, writing, writing. But we also read 50,000 word novels because they're all writing at the minimum word count is 50,000 words for them
yeah,
to complete the class successfully. And the book has to have a beginning, middle, and an end. So it could have big holes in it, but they've got a really, really, like I said, craptastic draft of something. But they get to read these no these other 50,000 word books like Fahrenheit. Like, I mean, there's
yeah, yeah,
so many really good ones out there. But that kind of gives them, I always say words in, words out, right? You got to always be reading, and you just never know what's going to spark your next idea, solve the next problem.